But today we've been talking about who is running the country right now while Trump suffers from Fatmentia, the intersection of obesity and dementia. This man is clearly insane. He does not know what is going on. He does not know who is running the country. They give him his Twitter and they give him his money, and he sits in the corner, and someone else is running the government right now. And we do not know who. It is not the Congress. The Congress is effectively non functional. It is not the court system. They are additionally dysfunctional currently. All the apparatuses of government are failing us right now. And all these safeguards that we thought we had in place are failing us right now at the exact same time. How exactly do you have a government where no one knows who's pulling the strings? Nobody knows who is in charge of making policy. Where Netanyahu can come in with a PowerPoint presentation, and now we're spending $2 billion a day on a war that has nothing to do with us. I mean, exactly at one point in time, do we say that this is not something that is sustainable? What do we do when we see that all the safeguards that we put in place nationally aren't working? Because at the end of the day, I mean, we have a 25th Amendment, but we don't want to do it. Well, we have a Congress that refuses, or we have a cabinet that refuses to enact it. Then we have the impeachment process. But even if you get it through the House of Representatives, you need a 2/3 majority in the Senate to actually remove this person from office. And as long as MAGA Republicans are still in line with President Trump, we're never going to have that happen. This very much reminds me so there's a Greek writer by the name of Polybius. And the Romans invaded Greece, and they when they conquered it, they took thousands and thousands of their greatest scholars and writers and academics to Rome to civilize them, because Rome was very much a kind of a barbarian outpost at the time. These were, people think, descendants of the Etruscans who founded their own colony, and because they didn't really have culture and writing and religion, they just stole it from Greece. This is why we call it Greco-Roman civilization, because it was the Romans copying the Greeks by kidnapping their scholars and religious experts and stuff. And that's why there's a Roman god that's a corollary for every Greek god. This is why the Greek architecture is similar to the Roman architecture, etc., because they just imported and stole their culture. But Polybius wanted to find out how it was that less than 150 years after Alexander the Great had conquered most of the known world, that a civilization as great as Greece had fallen, and why that same thing would not happen to Rome. So he created this concept called anacyclosis, which is the cycle of constitutions. And this way, when he says that a nation begins with a virtuous and strong leader who's the founding father of the nation, and this becomes the monarch, we say, well, man, this guy founded the nation. He brought us freedom. He protected us. We should just make him the king and put him in charge. And that goes great for a while. And then we pass that monarchy down to his kids, because if he did great, why wouldn't his son do great? And then over time, that monarchy becomes corrupted. It becomes fat. It becomes profligate. Instead of serving the people, it serves itself. And in order for that monarchy to hold on to power, it has to become more and more stringent. It has to tighten in. It has to become a tyranny. And that virtuous warrior king now becomes a tyrant. And this is as monarchies begin to corrupt, they can become tyrants. So then as the tyranny spreads in the second phase of the cycle of constitutions, you have the wealthy, the elites, the educated, and they rise up against this tyrannical government. And they overthrow it. And they say, well, we're going to have a government that is simply run by the smart, the educated, the noblemen of the community. We're going to have an aristocracy, so that we have the most learned individuals in the society that are running things. We have whoever's in charge of the environment is going to have a PhD in environmental science. Whoever's in charge of energy is going to be a nuclear physicist with multiple Nobel Prizes in nuclear physics, and that's who's going to be in charge. And we're going to have this government by the most well and able people. But over time, they start only caring about those people who are part of that aristocratic class. They start making rules and laws that benefit them and that solidify power in their own hands. They decide that, well, if these people are below us that we're governing, then why do we even need to care about what's going on for them? We need to just make sure that we stay in power. And that cycles through, and you go from an aristocracy to an oligarchy, where you simply have government by the rich, for the rich. And then the people say, man, this is crazy. We can't have all the money and power concentrated in the 1%. We can't simply say that we are vassals to the aristocracy. What makes them better than me just because they got a bunch of degrees and stuff? Just because they are from the wealthy and elite families? Why should they have a bigger say in government than I do as a normal working person every day? And you have a popular uprising, whether it's the American Revolution, the French Revolution, popular revolutions internationally. You have this uprising against those oligarchs, against those elites who are running the government. And we call it a democracy, the demos, the people, the demographics. The people come together and say, we are going to run this country. Everyone will have a vote. Everyone will have a say. They will no longer be ruled by simply the rich and well-connected. We're going to bring down this oligarchical system. We're going to bring in a democratic system. But then what happens? Well, then that democracy gets taken over by demagogues. You end up with, because the people aren't as educated, aren't as concentrated on public policy, anyone who can give a good speech, anyone who can enrage the hearts and passions of the populace, they gain political power. Not through ability, not through caring about the people, but by being able to stir essentially anarchy. Because now you have people who are being pulled apart by factions, being pulled apart by race, by gender, by political ideology. They solidify behind different fiefdoms, different strongmen who say they represent the interests of those democratic principles. You fall into what's called onchalary, which is mob rule. Ochlocracy, ochlocracy. That's why I can't pronounce. I have a speech impediment. But that's the mob rule that besets any society. That's where we are right now, where we're in this place of mob rule, where the democratic system has broken down, where the checks and balances that were supposed to maintain this constitutional republic evaporate around us. And then what always happens once you end up with mob rule? One person arises. They're able to quell the warring factions, bring the nation back together. They're able to save the country, save the republic. And we say, man, that person is so smart, so able, so powerful, so charismatic. We should make them king. And now the cycle repeats itself. That's anacyclosis. And then Polybius in his writing said, well, I don't think that will happen to the Roman Republic because they have checks and balances. They have a Senate and not just a king. They have popular votes. They have a court system. They have a military where no one man, one group would ever be able to fully subjugate the rest. And this all went well and good until Caesar crossed the Rubicon. And then he converted the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire. And then the cycle continued. And America is right now in that cycle where our democracy has descended into mob rule. Mob rule has resulted in us working our way in a faction of America, electing one person as their king, one person that can do no wrong. The democratic system has fallen apart. There are no checks and balances on their power. And so now that we've got into that place, we have to find out, will we decide that we are going to be under a monarch who has now become a tyrant? Or are we going to try to break that cycle of constitutions and restore power to the people? And that is where we are currently at in our political system, as we are dealing with a president who is suffering from Fatmentia, who no longer is able to run the government. We are in the broken constitutional cycle. And we're going to have to pull that power out of the hands of the oligarchs, out of the hands of the tyrants. We have to bring back together the mob rule that we have now and find a governing system that will stop us from falling the way that the Greeks and the Romans and the British and every empire before us has. Well, hear what you guys have to say about this. Call in 447-226-1380, News and Talk 1380 WAOK.